Shortly after saving Luke, Carly, and Sarah from Sunshine Mobile Home Park, Lee and Jane had led the group back towards Parker's Run. What happened back there was all close to death yet again. If Clementine had not slapped Sarah to snap out of it, they were not sure what would have happened to her. The point was that they escaped, and that's all that matters now. Luke felt himself struggling to walk a little due to the extreme pain he felt on his ribs. He placed his hand over them when he finally decided to speak. "I don't mean to sound like a little kid, but are we there yet?" "Not that much further to go," Lee assured, turning his head towards to do another head count to make sure everyone was accounted for. Clementine and Sarah were behind him, and Carly and Luke were behind them. Was it that they continued to walk back towards their destination? Clementine turned her attention towards Sarah, who was walking right beside her, but her expression was still all in sadness. "I didn't want to hit you, Sarah, but I had no choice. But I promise we can get through this. We'll all be here for you." "But I don't know if I can get through this," Sarah admitted, still losing hope of surviving on her own without her father here to protect her. She was beginning to prefer the older days when he kept her inside, away from all the danger all the time. "Can you at least try for us?" Clementine requested, but she did not get any response from her best friend. "I think Sarah just needs a little time to herself, Clementine," Jane replied, turning her attention back towards the young girl. Let's let her have a little privacy." Clementine looked towards Sarah for a moment before she picked up pace a little and walked at the same speed level with Jane and Lee. As they continued walking, Jane decided to state a couple of things for them that they may want to consider. "Guys, that was a close call back there," Jane reminded them, assuming that it was nothing but pure luck would have got them out of there. She tried to keep quiet so Sarah did not have to hear. "The way Sarah is will cause problems." "I really don't understand you sometimes, Jane," Lee admitted, arching his curious eyebrow as he spoke. "First we're determined to save them, but when it comes to walkers inside, you were just willing to leave her to save yourself?" "It's a long story, Lee," Jane admitted, taking her memories back to a tragic day that haunted her since the day it happened. "I've seen that kind of situation before, only it didn't end with everyone surviving. Sometimes you just have to make the tough decision, whatever you like it or not." Luke, who assumed overheard every word Jane had been saying, had picked up a little pace with them, but he still had his hand over his torso. He felt guilty to depress their escape rather than helping the others first. I don't believe it. That's what I did. The second we were planning to escape, I was the first to climb out." "Luke, don't let your guilt consume you," Jane assured, not seeming to be all effective what he had just told her and the others. "Yeah, well, I won't be able to forget it," Luke admitted slightly, with a mad expression across his face, like if he was angry at himself. "Me and my sister traveled 4 states together. Every morning she would always tell me that she didn't want to get up, and then I would make her get up by convincing her, pushing her, even carry her if I had to," Jane replied, as she began to explain to them why it was dangerous to have someone unvulnerable to the group. "My sister Jamie and I got myself into a situation like that once. We were trapped on a rooftop by walkers, and I jumped onto the other roof, but Jamie, she just couldn't do it. She stayed, and they got her. Before she died, I told her that if that's what she wanted, then that was her choice." "You left your sister?" Luke asked in shock, but he kept a normal tone while asking. "I'm sorry, Jane," Lee apologized, giving his condolences to her, but he did not want to think that matter. "It's haunted me for a long time," Jane continued. Her expression was now changing into a sad as she continued to bring up the memories of that tragic day. "I realized I always kept a hold of her like a parent, but all she wanted me to do was to let her be free. That's what Sarah was today. No regard for her own safety or ours." "She's not dangerous," Lee replied, refusing to believe that Sarah was going to be one to lead their group into downfall. He had hoped that she would make this through. Heck, if Clementine can make it, so can she. It's going to be okay. Just remember, you saved Sarah today. Doesn't mean you can always save her in the future." Jane finished and finally decided to keep quiet for the rest of the journey before the others turned on her. "Let's just get back to Parker's Run," Lee ordered, acting as the leader of the group now that Carlos was no longer around to assist them. As Carly had told them on the way to St. John's Dairy Farm, he would make a great leader. After a few more silent moments of walking through the woods of Carolina, the small group merged into an open area where Parker's Run was sights away, only just a few more feet away. Inside, Bonnie was currently supporting Rebecca, who struggled to walk in her condition. Mike was keeping watch by the entrance, folding his arms together. He had somewhat of a worried expression when he noticed Rebecca started to look weaker and weaker by the second. But there was nothing he could do, unfortunately. But wait. He turned around, and when he heard footsteps, focusing his attention back towards the door, and the familiar faces had arrived them to smile slightly. Well, I'll be damned. You found them. Mike, to be honest, I'm a little amazed myself, Luke admitted, now walking normal, not having to rest his hand on his torso. If it weren't for Lee, Clem, and Jane, I wouldn't imagine what would have happened to us. Lee, Carly, Clementine, Sarah, and Jane and Luke all walked into Parker's Run, never being more relieved and reunited with their friends. Rebecca and Bonnie also came closer towards them to greet them properly, despite Rebecca's condition. She had a slight smile of relief seeing everyone here accounted for, but she mainly focused her attention towards Sarah, exactly how she felt after losing Elvin. Sarah, are you okay, honey? Sarah did not respond to her question and merely moved closer towards Rebecca, with her hands placed together. She did not say anything as she slowly hugged Rebecca for comfort. It'll be okay, sweetie, Rebecca assured, placed her arms around Sarah as she slowly comforted her. You're here now, and everything's going to be all right. Rebecca, is that baby coming soon? Luke inquired, hoping that he was not being too pushy by asking. But he had to be prepared for when it was time for the baby to be delivered. I don't... She groaned slightly, gripping Bonnie's hand a little harder while doing so. I think I'll be all right. Just help me walk around a little, will ya? I'll be fine. All right, everyone should get some rest for a while, Lee suggested, while folding his arms together. The members agreed that the best thing they could do right now. Carly helped Bonnie move Rebecca over somewhere where she could sit down, while the rest of them sat down somewhere to rest up. Mike still had to keep watch for any walkers or someone they did not recognize. Before Lee could settle down for a while, Bonnie approached him after leaving Rebecca into the care of Luke, and by the looks of her face, she looked concerned about something. Hey Lee, mind if I speak to you in private for a moment? Sure, he agreed, following Bonnie only a few feet over towards the outside of one of those tents. Bonnie sighed as she stopped in her steps, once they were hearing out of range from the others. She turned around to face Lee, and decided just to come out with what she needed to say. Lee, I ain't going to be a sugarcoat anything, but with that baby's coming soon, and if Rebecca says differently, do you all anything know about babies? She shifted her attention towards Rebecca, who was beginning to cry while being supported by Luke. Without Carlos, we don't have a doctor. I don't know, Lee admitted, folding his arms together, well slightly in a worried tone. He knew for a fact no one present had any experience with babies. My friend Kenny knew about babies, and his wife was not a doctor, but she was a vet. I wish they were there now. What are you going to do? Well, I guess we'll have to improvise, Bonnie stated, unable to think of what else they could do when it came to Rebecca giving birth. Do you have any idea we can get... Oh, shit! Rebecca, does that mean you know what? Lee and Bonnie were startled by all of a sudden yells and shifted their attention towards the fountain. Luke was the one who yelled and was supporting Rebecca in a desperate time of need. Lee put the conversation that they were having on hold, ran towards them to investigate the situation at hand. Nearby, Jane was the last one to join the others in the fountain. She had gone over a couple of maps on the wall nearby. There was not much to look at around the area, but there was a couple of things they may find useful. What do we do here? Luke inquired, while he struggled slightly to keep Rebecca standing. He was still somewhat in pain from before. Are you all right? Mike asked her, but without a doubt a stupid question to ask right now. Does it hurt? Of course it frickin' hurts, Rebecca snapped, growing in agonizing pain as she knew for a fact it was time. What's going on here? Lee inquired. He was afraid they already knew the answer to this. He just had to ask them nevertheless. Rebecca's water broke, Carly answered, Melissa folding her arms together. Oh, Jesus, I don't know what we should do. Neither do I, Bonnie replied, moving over to the opposite side of Rebecca to assist her in a familiar way, like Luke was helping her. Oh, frick. What the hell can we do? Lee inquired. He shifted his attention over to every individual person in the area for advice. But every person met his eyes and merely gave him a shrug of look on their heads from side to side. He placed his hand upon his forehead and closed his eyes for a moment to think. All right. Guys, give me a minute. Well, you better think fast, Luke suggested. He moved away from Rebecca and let Bonnie support her on her own. With his injuries, he could not want to risk a sudden pain that may cause him to let her go. There ain't a chance Rebecca can move like this. He's right, Jane agreed, knowing full as well as the consequences they face if they were not careful enough. She'll make a lot of noise that will distract them, and they'll be able to smell her blood too. We have to be careful. Understood, Lee nodded, as he was now in deep thought of what he was going to do next. He only dazed out of his thoughts when Carly snapped him out of it with her voice. Alright, right, sorry. Okay, we'll just need clean water for starters, and some blankets to keep the baby warm, especially the weather. And we'll need some shelter too, Carly added, since she herself was quite freezing in the weather, and meant no way a baby would be born to be survive. There were a couple of buildings not too far from there. Mike joined her in the conversation. Being quite familiar with this area, one of them might do the trick, if they're not already inhabited by people, or walkers, of course. I think the museum sounds good, Bonnie admitted. She read the sign in her mind that pointed in the direction of the museum, the only 0.2 miles down the road. There's a building by the river, too, Jane replied, placing her hand upon her hip was it speaking. Only a couple of minutes away. Lee nodded to each of their suggestions, and as active leader of the group for a moment, he decided to make their next plan of action. All right, everyone, listen up. Bonnie, you and Mike will go to the museum. Jane, you and Clementine search that building by the river. Luke, you stay here and guard the perimeter, and Carly take care of Rebecca and Sarah. We're going to look for water and clothing, disinfected. Everyone understand? Got it. Yep. Understood. No problem. Everyone replied in an illusion, understanding their orders and about to go their separate ways. Lee, Mike, and Bonnie proceeded down the road that would take them to the museum. Clementine and Jane made their way towards the building, while Carly and Luke stayed by to protect Sarah and Rebecca. Before Jane left with Clementine, she approached Carly and offered her Glock 17 she found on the dead walker earlier. She remembered the conversation between Lee and a couple of others, and how one of them mentioned Carly's accurate skills. Here, I heard you were good with these. You might need it, but there are only a few rounds left. Thanks, she smiled, accepting her favorite type of gun. She placed it in her jacket pocket for now. Jane nodded, but before she turned away, followed Clementine down the path. The small building she had mentioned. Now that everyone had orders of their plan, they just have to make a haste to go on a move before Rebecca gave birth to her baby.